Well, each main council meeting, we're working our way through the Lord's Prayer to better understand what we're praying about. And today I'd like to say a few words about the phrase, "Thy kingdom come." A kingdom is a place where a king or queen or government rule. And in Nuneaton, Bedworth, it's the council who rule. In the United Kingdom, it's the Parliament in London that rules. Although at the moment we're trying to unsuccessfully regain powers from the EU. But in our prayer, we pray that God would come and rule. And though I know you enjoy what you do, I have to say that God will do a better job. For example, when he agrees planning applications, there'll be no one who complains, and everyone will think it's a good idea. So we're praying that God would come and put right what's wrong with the world, and hope that that day comes soon. So if you'd like to, then join me in praying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, thanks, Mark. If you'd like to be seated, please. Okay, good evening everyone. If we can move straight on to the agenda. Item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. We're not expecting the fire alarms to go off, so excuse me. So if they do, we'll treat them for real, and if we can evacuate the building through these doors into the chamber, I believe there's a fire door up in the public gallery. And if we can go down the stairs, not use the lift, and meet across the road by the Yorkshire Bank. It's also a good time to remind people to turn their phones off or to put them onto silent. And also, the council does record all of its meetings now to be sent out via its website. And I do believe there may be a member of the public filming the proceedings as well. Item number 2 is to receive apologies. I've had apologies from councillors Margrave, Beaumont, Smith and Elliott. We have any others? No? Okay, thank you. Item number 3 is just a reminder to members is to please turn on your microphones when you wish to speak, and then once you're finished to turn them off again. And there will be a roving microphone available for members of the public. Item number 4 is to confirm the 2 meetings we had, the ordinary council meeting and the extraordinary meeting held on the 13th of September. Are you happy that I sign those as a true and correct record? Agreed, thank you. Can't find the paper. I'll catch up with them at the end. Item number 5 is to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest and other interests in matters under consideration pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 4A.2. No? Okay, thank you. Item number 6 to receive announcements from The Managing Director?
No, Mr Mayor.
The Leader?
Just and I know that the press did make this claim, but people have misunderstood. I have not resigned as the council leader. I am actually not standing for election next May, so I'm retiring. But I just wanted to clarify that I am going to retire at the end of April, the beginning of May, and I'm not actually resigning as the council leader.
Just a few things from myself. Members will be aware that I carried out my sponsored wing walk in October. Thank you very much for all those people that pledged their support. There's just a few people that still owe their pledges. I'll be down in the Mayor's Parlour after the meeting if anybody wants to bring that along, or if you can leave it with either Lindsay or in an envelope in my tray, that would be good. And for all you, I know there's quite a few quizzers amongst us. We've got 2 quiz nights coming up, the 12th of January at the Anchor Inn in Nuneaton, and the 19th of January at the Griffin Coton Club. And a big event, I'm giving you plenty of notice because it's going to be a fantastic night. The 20th of April, I'll probably give you reminders as well, 20th of April next year, in the Saunders Club in Bedworth, we'll be having Elvis himself. He won't be in the chip shop that night, he'll be in the Saunders Club. He's a brilliant act, so come along and enjoy that. And all that leaves me is, because probably won't get a chance later on, is to wish everybody a very happy Christmas and enjoy the festive season. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Item number 7 is to hear and answer questions from residents of the borough. We've got 7 questions submitted. We've also got 8 from members, so I'm not intending to take any supplementaries, so if people can make their statements or ask their questions. Councillor Condicle, is there a problem with that?
I just want, including my wife, other questions were submitted and not allowed, so it is useful to actually be clear that more than 7 questions were submitted.
I'll be absolutely clear. I have 7 questions in front of me. I believe, is that what people have got in front of them? Thank you. And in regards to members, I have 8 questions listed. So the first speaker from the public is Kyle Evans.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Many months ago, myself, Councillor Gran and Councillor Pandare took part in a litter pick along Griff Lane, the old disused road connecting the Griff to the Bermuda Industrial Estate. It was a very successful litter pick and we collected around 30 bags of litter. Of course, the council's environmental team were on hand to assist us, and as usual, they did a fantastic job. I'd like to thank them and the other members of the public for coming along. I think we did quite a good job. During this litter pick, I was amazed that there were no litter bins whatsoever along the route. I walked back a few nights ago to find that all the rubbish has come back again. I'm sure that me and other Conservative councillors will go back soon to do another litter pick, but it would make a lot of sense for the council to invest in some litter bins to put along the routes to limit the amount of litter dropped. People walk back from McDonald's, KFC and Subway, finish what they're eating, and because of no bins, they drop their litter. So could I please ask the Cabinet Member to consider getting some bins along the Griff Lane route so that we can help make the borough look a cleaner and more vibrant place? Thank you.
Thank you. Any response to that?
First off, thank you for raising this issue. Griff Lane itself has been built over. Roads have been changed and deviated, but we assume that the section you were talking about is the bit that goes down to Coventry Road and across to where the bowling alley is and the cinema. The others go off into Arby Hall Estate. Unfortunately, this issue does highlight the highly inappropriate behaviour and attitudes that some of our residents take, and they're clearly prepared to discard litter as and when they want to. They don't give any thought to the detrimental effect that it has on the environment and the quality of life to other residents. If people have packaging from fast food outlets, then they should really be taking it home with them, not just dumping it where they think it's convenient to them. And if they do pass a litter bin on the way home, they can always put it back into that. The fact is, as we always keep saying, with the limited resources and ever decreasing resources that the Borough Council has got at its disposal, to deliver the wide range of services we provide to our residents means that our cleansing teams are unable to walk the litter pick all the areas that we want to within the borough, and Griff Lane is one of them. However, I have asked for a litter bin to be installed at the point where Griff Lane meets the Coventry Road, and hopefully the provision of that bin will encourage some of them, not all of them, I doubt very much of it, all of them will do it, to amend their behaviour, and we'll see how we go with that. I have to say, Mr Mayor, as well, that his public spiritedness of Mr Evans and his Tory colleagues over there is all very well, but the old cynic in me just say that it forms a nice photo opportunity for the election leaflets in 2018. So, with that, I think I've finished. Yes, I have. The end of the day, Chair, it's really down to residents to behave responsibly and have some pride in their borough.
Our second question, Kevin Moore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Democracy is by far the best way of governance in all aspects of politics in the United Kingdom. A key part of the democratic process is that the individual has the right to have their say, and when people are excluded from the democratic process, as at Newcastle under Lyme recently, democracy is threatened. Online petitions are one of the many ways for which people to express their views or opinions. Many members of this council chamber from all political parties have signed online petitions, and they are used by various councils across the country, including Warwickshire County Council. The leader of the council may be aware that members of this council have signed online petitions at the county council, such as the one relating to children's centres. Given that online communication is the most commonly used form of communication today, especially amongst younger people, will the leader of the council agree to lift the council's ban on online petitions so that more people are encouraged to take part in the democratic process of the borough?
Thank you. Councillor Harvey,
Comment on the situation at Newcastle under Lyme, which is an ongoing legal matter and clearly not the remit of this council. I can also tell Mr Moore that I do not have the power as leader to lift a ban, as he calls it, on online petitions. That is a matter for full council. This was a decision of council due to complexities of running an e-petition scheme, along with the expense at a time of possible cuts in services due to lower government grants. The Conservative government repealed the duty to have an e-petition scheme when they came to power in 2010. To have an effective scheme would require investment into specialist software to ensure that only genuine signatories agreed to the petition. Because of the cost, the council took the decision not to implement the scheme when the government changed the law. As we are now faced with yet more cuts to our grant in the coming year, such a use of scarce resources can hardly be justified by us as a small district council as opposed to a large organisation such as the county. But I do have to add, Mr Mayor, that of course the public are entitled to speak at all our council meetings, committee meetings, cabinet meetings, and we were one of the first councils in the country to do
so
that.
can you just give me a moment, just to remain in their seats, not jump up and down waving about, please. Thank you. Councillor Harvey, I'm sorry for that interruption.
In the country to do that, and I believe at Warwickshire County Council that still doesn't apply to every meeting, Chair.
Excuse me, if you wouldn't shout out, the meeting's in progress. The question number 3 is Anne Llewellyn Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the light of businesses like HSBC and Barclays moving out of Bedworth and the number of empty shops in the town centre, how many new businesses have the Borough Council succeeded in attracting in Bedworth town centre in the last 6 months?
Councillor Howard.
Clarify the position in relation to the 2 Bedworth banks. Barclays has not closed but is opening reduced hours from 9:30 to 4:30 Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday only. HSBC closed earlier this year as part of a national programme, and this is far from a localised issue. Indeed, over 1,700 high street bank branches have closed throughout the UK over the past 5 years as customers increasingly move to online banking. It's important to point out that our vacant unit rate in both Nuneaton and Bedworth remains below the national average, and in fact this council has very few of its own premises vacant. I would also highlight the fact that there have been 2 new store openings in Bedworth over the past 6 months. The carpet store adjacent to Costa Coffee reopened earlier this year as Carpet Kingdom, and Pound Stretcher has taken on a prime retail location in Bedworth as part of its UK-wide expansion. Pound Stretcher is set to open its doors as Pound Store this weekend. Work is taking place on it today, having taken out a 10-year lease on 6 All Saints Square. David Walton, head of retail, commented that the team was particularly pleased with the latest store in Bedworth, describing the position as a first-class position. And I have to say, Mr. Mayor, that we are very happy that Bedworth has largely weathered the storm in terms of retailing, and you can go to Bedworth any day of the week and find that the major car parks are full of cars, and that is a very good sign when retailing has been hit all over the country.
Question number 5 is Owen Reid. Well, again, I've got one on that page which says question number 5 and one on here that says... Right, Sam Croft, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appendix D of the agenda for today's meeting shows a downward spend pressure of £55,000 due to reduced car park income for 2018-19. What action is the controlling group taking to address this shortfall in car parking charges, which has arisen since they were raised against opposition advice?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holdington?
Built in a spend pressure of 55,000 in terms of decreased gross income from our car parks into our budgeting work for 2018-19, as we want to be prudent, sensible and realistic in the way we approach setting the 2018-19 budget. The reduction in our car parking income reflects a national trend up and down the country of fewer people visiting town centres to shop as online shopping continues to grow in popularity. And I'm sure most people in here have probably shopped online at some point during the year. We are, of course, striving to deliver a wider offer of services and entertainment in our town centres to attract people into them, and we will continue to invest in our town centres. But we don't want to pretend that the changes in national shopping habits aren't actually happening. In order to mitigate the effects of reduced likely gross income from our car parks in the future, we are working hard to reduce the costs we incur in actually operating the car parks to try and maintain the net income we receive from our car parks. Our work on keeping a tight control on operating costs in the current financial year means that at the end of October, the net income from our car parking operation was a modest £6,000 below budget.
Item number 5, Owen Reid, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was for Councillor Trish Elliott, but unfortunately she's not here tonight, so I will be sure to forward it on to her. A few months ago, Councillor Tricia Elliott, the Labour representative for the Barpool ward, said on the Facebook page, living in Nuneaton, whilst addressing the concerns of residents concerned about the planned developments, I recognise the concerns being expressed, but have faith it will all turn out fine in the end. Does the Cabinet member agree with me that local councillors should be given more reassurances to their residents when it comes to this disastrous borough plan? Just telling residents to have faith simply does not cut it.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
could I just the backbench councillor cannot be asked questions.
Yeah, the question, Councillor Holdington.
Made by another councillor. However, what I can tell Mr Reid is that this council has submitted a robust plan that will deliver over the next 20 years the housing, employment and infrastructure that the entire borough needs.
The next statement is from Mike Bannister.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We were obviously shocked when we heard the news that the Labour Council in Nuneaton and Bedworth proposed to cease all of its funding to advice rights. The only opportunity that was made available to us to protest this decision was at a Cabinet meeting on the 22nd of November this year. I pointed out to that Cabinet meeting that in making this decision, the authority had totally failed to meet the aspirations set out in the Council's Code of Corporate Governance and Constitution. Was this good decision making? Well, let's consider that. Was the decision taken on the basis of due consultation? Was the decision taken on the basis of professional advice of officers? Was everything relevant taken into account? Has the decision been well explained? What were the reasons for the decision? What alternative options were considered? Where does this leave the council? Well, they've driven a coach and horses through their own code of corporate governance and constitution. They've totally sidelined their own overview and scrutiny committee to whom we as an organisation report outcomes. There are no reports that we know of. No impact assessment has been carried out. The council, who says it respects the rule of law, acts with integrity, ensures openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement, should walk the walk and not talk the talk. To date, our concerns in respect of the failure of this council to follow a fair and reasonable process have been dismissed. Dawn Dawson, the Director of Housing and Communities, on behalf of the portfolio holder, Councillor Jackson, dismisses our concerns and tells us that it would not be appropriate to consult before a decision is made. Now, that's clearly a new way of thinking, and one which I am sure will concern all of the residents of this borough. Apart from being told that, of course, these were difficult times for the council and that huge savings need to be made, the only other explanation we received in respect of this decision was when Councillor Harvey said, "You are Warwickshire Employment Rights Service. Let Warwickshire pay for it." If Councillor Harvey, or indeed Councillor Jackson, had carried out an appropriate consultation, had they consulted with their officers, or indeed carried out stakeholder engagement, they would have understood that as a service we were required by this council to seek alternative funding as a condition of our service level agreements. All additional funding secured by advice rights has directly benefited the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Had we not used the name Warwickshire Employment Rights Service, we would not have been able to secure that additional funding. I still hold out the hope that this authority will listen to what we have to say, will reconsider and will do the right thing. But if that is not the case, Mr Mayor, then I have to tell this authority that very reluctantly we will have no other recourse than to seek a judicial review in relation to the council's decision-making process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Mr Mayor, I will clarify that the organisation for which he works has been advised by the Director of Housing and Communities that consultation would take place with the organisation and at no point have concerns been dismissed. He was reminded that his employer had a 2-year agreement with his council which ends on March the 31st, 2018. This agreement specifically refers to whether or not the council has the available finance. The decision by Cabinet triggers the consultation process, and no final decision will be made until Council in February 2018, in line with the Council's constitution.
And Councillor, this item is for questions from the public. Question number 7 is Tazib Mughal.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the Leader of the Council. Is he, like me, disgusted by the way the Tory County Council ignored their own consultation process on the children's centres, which found in favour of the current setup? Just an ongoing example of the north-south divide, supported by Tory County councillors sitting in the chamber tonight. Shame on them.
Hang on. Councillor Harvey?
Well, that I agree entirely with the sentiments he has expressed.
Okay, thank you. Following some legal advice, Councillor Condacourt, can you tell me what you were trying to make a point of?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Raised by the public to be referred to the appropriate scrutiny panel. And can I have a seconder for that?
To a scrutiny panel. All those in favour of that? And against? And abstentions? That motion's lost. Which takes us on to questions by members. Councillor Margrave.
Down on the motorway. Last weekend saw Small Business Saturday across our borough and the country. Local small businesses and start-ups are critical to a thriving economy and creating new jobs. They also provide services for local people and are important in the success of the High Street. Can the Leader of the Council tell us how we are or have been supporting local small businesses and start-ups, including those in our town centres?
We will shortly be launching a town centre's website and highlighting the events throughout the area. This will advertise all of our town centre businesses and showcase the offer of our town centres online. We are also launching our new NBB Invest website. This showcases the offer of the borough to prospective businesses and investors, and again will advertise the opportunities to businesses to set up and grow within the borough. We are finalising the infrastructure for the Wi-Fi, which will attract more people into the town centres and to help small businesses through increasing footfall. We continue to maintain our excellent relationship with our partners at the Coventry and Warwickshire LEP Growth Hub to aid businesses when they are looking to start up or to grow. The recent Coventry and Warwickshire Business Festival was a great success, with events happening throughout the sub-region. Borough businesses hosted events, and our businesses were able to attend all events to network and learn new skills. In addition to this, we run the Chilvers Coat and Craft Centre for small businesses, the Attleborough Industrial Estate units, as well as lock-up units in Bedworth Market, which provide an excellent opportunity for most small businesses to start up. And I can tell Councillor Margrave and the Council that, in fact, Mr Mayor, we're very pleased to say that the small business lock-ups in Bedworth Market are all full.
Number 2 is by Councillor Caroline Phillips.
The Tory government shook the magic money tree to pay for an EU referendum. They then shook it to pay for a general election. This backfired so they had to shake it again to pay a bribe to the DUP. Currently, the tree is being constantly shaken to pay for an ever-increasing Brexit divorce bill. Does the leader agree that the proceeds from the magic money tree could have been better spent on vital public services?
The proverbial nail on the head. How is it that millions, to be exact 1,000 million, extra can be found for Northern Ireland when the rest of the UK continues to suffer from slashed government grants? Not only are the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth suffering as a result of lower budgets, but we are now being asked to see more services hit so that Arlene Foster and her DUP friends can be rewarded for their loyalty. We have all seen this week, Mr Mayor, what sort of loyalty this is. And now the whole country is threatened with further chaos, possibly having no Brexit deal at all, thanks to the DUP, who nicely pocketed the 1,000 million. How long do the rest of us have to suffer financial cuts to our public services so Theresa May can pay further monies to Ulster, money she repeatedly says cannot be afforded in the rest of the UK?
Question 3, Councillor Grant.
Since the Borough Council recently confirmed that they have not ruled out paying for a solicitor to represent them at the February Borough Plan examination, will the portfolio holder tell us if the Council will again be spending £19,000 on a solicitor to defend the third-rate Borough Plan?
Whether to use specialist legal support is an operational decision for officers who, using their skill and judgment, have to determine what is in the best interests of this council. Given the importance of the Borough Plan to the borough and its impact, which will be felt for many years to come, it is imperative that councillors have the best plan possible for adoption. Given that many developers and landowners employ specialist lawyers to promote their sites, it is not unreasonable for the council to do the same to retain a balance of power in the hearings. The costs of external legal advisors is fully budgeted for in the Borough Plan budget, and no decision has yet been taken as to when and in connection with which issues specialist counsel will be employed. In connection with stage 1 of the process, council's comment has yet again been completely taken out of context by Councillor Gran. The point made by council was that the threshold to satisfy the duty to cooperate was low and assessed on a pass-fail basis. Council commented that even a third-rate plan could pass the test. That was not to suggest that the Borough Plan is third-rate.
Councillor Tromans.
The standards of grounds maintenance across large parts of the borough continues to be poor. Yet despite pressure from myself, my colleagues and the council tax-paying residents, the leadership of the council appears incapable of getting this poor performance rectified. Indeed, page 93 of their latest cabinet report shows again how poor service delivery continues to be. People and services delivery, it says. Standards of grounds maintenance work, 56% currently, against a 65 to 75% benchmark, as there have been issues specifically with path overhangs, lack of path and obstacle weed spraying, and grass cutting and removal process. With the leader throwing in the towel, will the portfolio holder now finally step up and get these grounds maintenance failings sorted, once and for all, or will he also admit to a legacy of failure and resign too?
A matter of personal explanation for those who are quite unclear with the English language, that when you say, will he resign too, it implies someone else has resigned. As I said earlier, Mr Mayor, I have not resigned.
Okay, thank you. And I think the wording is perhaps unnecessary about throwing in the towel, etc. And bearing in mind we're meant to be in the season of goodwill, probably unnecessary. Councillor Ian Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The report Councillor Tromans is referring to was presented to the recent Environmental Scrutiny Panel and was attended by senior directors from Glendale. This gave all members the opportunity to attend and ask questions, or the members of the committee to scrutinise and question Glendale's performance over the last year. There were very few questions from the Conservative members, and none from Councillor Tromans. Officers and I had been very surprised that so few questions had been asked of Glendale's management. Whilst the report did identify poor performance in relation to informal areas, which can be defined as natural environment type areas, you would have noted from the report that the formal areas, which make up the parks, sports facilities, cemeteries, housing sites, etc., constantly performed in excess of the benchmark figure he talks about of 80% month on month. Councillor Tromans, you are conveniently forgetting to mention this. The current contract, as members will be aware, has been extended to November 2019. Glendale have been working with Nuneaton since 1997. The remainder of the borough was contracted out with them in 2009, that's the Conservatives, which I believe was under their administration. Officers are currently working on a new contract and as part of this exploring avenues in relation to the future delivery. But it is not an easy task to balance the public expectations, standards and the cost given that grounds maintenance budget has reduced by 58% since 2009 due to government cuts. It is more and more difficult to deliver the same service. I can also confirm that Glendale's senior management team met with members of the council's management team and have provided the council now with an improvement plan to ensure that service delivery reaches the required standards for the remainder of the contract period. This will include the Glendale appointing 2 members of staff to specifically ensure works are undertaken to the required standard and to proactively identify issues. Basically, they're monitoring officers. The previously mentioned, this was presented to the previous scrutiny panel. They're also looking at an electronic management system, which was also presented to the scrutiny panel. This system will give live updates to the exact period that officers... Sorry, you'll have to excuse me, I'm going to say it. I've had a piece of glass in my eye today and it's playing havoc with my reading, so you'll have to bear with me, I'm afraid. Previously mentioned scrutiny panel. The system will give live updates to the exact whereabouts of any teams, including works undertaken and when they are due in the area again. Officers will have a log-on system which will allow members to pick up relevant information from our officers at any point in time. At previous full council, I asked members to use the official reporting system. Officers have looked at the period of August 2016 to 2017. They have recorded 40 complaints from councillors, with 31 of those complaints from myself and Councillor Jackson. The rest of the members that made the complaints were mainly Labour members. I do not know I do not know, Councillor Truman, where you get your information from. So can I ask you again to use the proper reporting process, challenge Glendale at the relevant scrutiny committee whilst they are present and report the issues in real time, not wait till full council. In a nutshell, I am suggesting you do your job as a councillor, or will you be the one throwing the towel in to concentrate on doing the other roles as Deputy Crime Commissioner? And he's obviously...
What is my role as Deputy?
Carry on, Councillor.
Yeah, I'll answer that, Chair.
Raise another point. I've been asked where I get my information from. I didn't give any information to this council, the grounds maintenance failings. I want to know why they haven't been recorded.
Councillor, well, I would suggest that clearly that would have to be looked into. The portfolio holder has explained about the numbers he's been given and where those complaints have come from. Councillor Lloyd, if you can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite simply, it has been looked into where the information come from. It's no good walking along a corridor and saying, "Oh, can you look into this for me?" You need to report it properly through the reporting process. It gets logged then. It definitely gets logged, as my 30-odd did. So, at the end of the day, Councillor, it has been looked into. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the officers, not me, because they're the people that have advised me, they're the people that have kept the log, and as far as I'm concerned, as far as they're concerned, you have not yet again used the reporting process. Use it.
Question number 5, Councillor Brindley.
Portfolio holder, please give an update on the total revenue that the climbing wall has brought in to date and what the total costs have been to date.
Climbing Tower team replaced the play ranges with the aim to encouraging healthy living and provide the access and to an exciting and challenging activity for the borough residents. The Sports Development Climbing Tower is a tool used to help encourage fitness in the community and is no different to any other service the council delivers. It is operated within the approved delivery budget for that service. As such, it was not intended to make a profit, but to provide a service to local residents at concessionary hire charge to enable the community to access it. In comparison, the Play Rangers service that the Climbing Tower service took over from costs in its last full year, 2015 to 16, £105,000. This cost excluded the realignment of a supervisory post from the Play Rangers service of around £30,000, making it in real terms around £135,000 real cost for the delivery of the Play Rangers service with no income. The total revenue cost for the delivery of the Climbing Tower in 2016-17, one full financial year, was £78,000, with the nominal income of £1,852 for the same period, with a further £2,000 income that will be received in 2017-18 year end. So you know where I'm coming from, Councillor Brindley? In my book, that service is saving £57,000 on the cost of delivering the Pay Rangers. We will, of course, continue to look at ways of improving the service delivery and are looking at partners that can help us with this.
I would like to move a motion on the basis of that question.
The count is 15 minutes maximum, and a member can't speak for more than 3 minutes.
Oh, the process, yeah. Yeah, if you want to put forward your proposal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that this council believes that the implementation of the climbing wall has been a disaster for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth and has not provided both a level of service or value for money that the service it replaced, the Play Rangers, provided. This council therefore resolves to remove the climbing tower from the budget immediately and invest the savings made into reinstating the Play Rangers service. In moving this motion, Mr. Mayor, if anyone decides to read the social media, I don't know what Councillor Lloyd is on about, but saying that it's improving access, those on social media are playing Spot the Climbing Tower because no one can actually find it. Now, bringing in a budget income of just short of £4,000 over 2 years is ridiculous, Mr. Mayor, based on the answer we've...
Is this still the motion?
Yeah, I was waiting for the motion. It needs to be seconded before the debate takes place. I think you've already entered into the debate.
And explain the reasons behind my motion, then it gets seconded, then it can go to debate. I get to speak twice, once moving it and giving my rationale, and also to wrap up the right of reply.
Well, it must work differently to other committees that we have here.
I can give that. I hope that hasn't been taken off the time I actually have to speak, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The budget that we've been told has been brought in just short of £4,000. If anyone bothers to read the original Cabinet papers, one of the selling points of this was we were going to bring in revenue to help support other services, and that has singularly failed. Councillor Lloyd spoke about £57,000 worth of savings that have been made compared to the service. He's comparing apples with oranges, Mr. Mayor, because the climbing tower, when anyone can find it, is only out and about at certain times of the year. The play ranges were much more of a round-the-year service and reached far more people than were ever reached by the climbing tower to date. So far, and if you read the budget book, Mr. Mayor, it does say that the climbing tower budget for the previous year and this year together combined to make a total of £175,000 operational costs, not to mention the capital expenditure we've incurred, or as some people believe, wasted. In the shadow budget last year, which we moved, and it was signed off by a 151 officer, we proposed scrapping the climbing wall and reinvesting in the play rangers service, and we were told it could be done. It was signed off by a 151 officer. So if we talk about actually assisting and improving access to our young children to actually get services and to increase activity, let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's follow the facts. Let's follow where the people actually use the services and reinvest that money, scrap the climbing tower, which is a great big white elephant, which has been a mess introduced by the Labour Party, and put it back where it belongs, back in the heart of the communities with the people who use it, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move the motion.
Member. Councillor Condacourt.
Fact calculations, £78,000. A child's charged £1 when they climb it, 1,800 and something pounds. That means every child that's climbed that climbing wall has cost £42. We could have hired a taxi, driven them to the climbing wall at the University of Coventry, which is by far more interesting than our little climbing wall, and had a taxi back probably for £42. £42 per every child who goes up 7 metres. I don't know how much per centimetre that costs, but it is just mind-blowingly stupid. We had a good play system. We could have other good play systems. Bunging £42 into someone climbing a little wall, rather than helping people who are unemployed, rather than helping people with all sorts of problems, is madness. We need a better system, and the climbing wall does not provide help for people who need to work. The play ranges and other things provided help. The climbing wall is an absolutely stupid idea. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Golby.
Just speaking on behalf of some of my residents that I know did used to use the play ranges, they used to come into my area. They don't use the climbing wall, and the areas that the play rangers were visiting has not been visited by the climbing wall at all. So as far as my residents are concerned, it's been a bit of a waste of time and money, and I would actually echo all the other comments that are coming from this side and all on social media as well, if you want to look at it. There's also the issue that I've had with people that I know whose children suffer from disabilities, which exclude them from using the climbing wall. So it's kind of reduced the user base for children, whereas the play ranges wasn't discriminatory in that way. So for a group whose motto is for the many, not the few, it's a bit ironic, really, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. The figures do not add up. They just do not add up. We are wasting money from the residents on a climbing wall. I don't like heights. My family have never used a climbing wall. We've never seen it. We would like to see it, but it's madness. Thank you.
For once, on this sort of subject, can we leave party politics out of it? You know, I sometimes think, why do we bother debating? We might as well go straight to the vote already. We're looking at the majority of people sitting on that side of the chamber. Can we just for once leave party politics out of this and bring common sense into it, please?
Councillor Harvey.
Mr Mayor, because that's how you're elected as a councillor, isn't it? First of all, we shouldn't invest on things on whether Councillor Guttridge likes climbing up them or not. I think that's ridiculous, Mr Mayor. But certainly, and I can only speak for last year's Christmas light switch on in Bulkington, I saw the climbing frame being used by many people. And I know it has at different events. If people attend these events, they will see the many people who use things. But surely, Mr Mayor, it shouldn't be about whether we as individuals want to use it and whether every single person can use the facilities. That we know isn't possible. But it comes a bit rich from the party who abolished the play scheme that benefited thousands of people and their families as soon as they came to power, and closed the public toilets in parks to talk about the facilities. Mr Mayor, this particular thing that we're talking about has been a great idea. Everything we've ever tried to do in terms of leisure and sport has been opposed by the people opposite. When Passport to Leisure was brought in, when Councillor Haynes was the leader, it was vehemently opposed. I admit none of you were sitting there then, but it was vehemently opposed by the Conservatives, who said we were giving away something for nothing. Well, look at how many children's lives may have been able to be saved by being able to swim free of charge. And we are still, Mr Mayor, one of the few places in this country where children with a Passport to Leisure can swim free of charge, and I am proud of it.
Ian Lloyd.
Well, I thought I made it crystal clear within the finances of that. The play ranges actually cost £105,000. That was back in 15-16. We've moved on since then, councillors. And yes, I'm looking at the Conservative group. We've moved on a long way since then. We've lost nearly 60% of our budget. Now, it says to me, if you want to go back to the play ranges, then the play ranges, what they used to do, and yes, they did a job. We couldn't measure the amount of people that went through the play ranges, because what they used to do, they'd turn up at a function, and they'd set up, and it could be face painting. I went through a number of them. It could be activities with children. It's a different type of activity, yes. And yes, it was useful activities with children. But you couldn't put your hand on your heart and say how many children had they actually touched by going through that system. Now, at least with the climbing wall, you know every individual that goes through it. Because at the end of the day, they're counted up and they're counted down. And it is a form of exercise in line with our corporate policies. At the end of the day, if we went back to the play ranges, we would have to find £105,000 plus £30,000 plus for the supervisor, rather than the £75,000 that we used in the 16-17 budget, which will go down again in the 17-18 budget. So I cannot, given the budget restraints, go back to paying out in excess of £105,000, because it would have to come from somewhere, the difference would have to come from somewhere else within the budget. So I can't go along with their proposals that they put forward. They're absolutely ludicrous. To say we're ludicrous, the figures don't balance up. They can't balance up. The money's gone. That lot over there took it away from us year on year on year. So it's very rich that they come and lecture us now on, our finances and the play scheme. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The right to reply. I can see Councillor Troman's asking to speak. I don't mind if he wants to, but you will run out of time on this and you won't have a vote taken. Do you want to speak?
We want to vote. I was only going to be very quick.
Councillor Wilson, if you want to do your right to reply.
From Councillor Lloyd, he'd rather go forward with failure than invest in success, a proven track record of success for our children. Now, even assuming that it's £1 a pop for going up and down, that's only 3,852 children who have actually used the service rather than those who actually use the Play Rangers scheme. Now, Councillor Harvey goes on about the past, and hopefully soon he will be the past, but he talks about the Superloos. They were costing £18 a flush. Well, does he still want to keep those in the budget and pay for that? I mean, Councillor Condacor pointed out £42 a trip up and down the climbing wall. He now wants to spend £18 to spend a penny. And the play scheme was too expensive at the time. At the time, we were facing an almost £1 million shortfall in the budget under, what was it? A Labour government when the Conservatives took control. So they want to go on about that. We had to make savings too. But the play ranges were a successful invention which came forward from Labour, we admit, but we took it further when we were in control, expanded the service and got to far more children than ever were achieved under the play scheme, which only operated during the summer holidays and the half terms. We introduced a service which got around there 365 days a year virtually. That's investing in services as opposed to the other side. Now, we proved in our shadow budget last time that it can be done under the current financial constraints, and they hate to admit it, but the current financial constraints are because of the mess that they left us in the country. They keep booing, but they don't like to acknowledge it. We have to pay down the deficit.
Councillor Wilson, can you speak to your motion?
I'm replying to what's been raised. It is a right of reply. They've raised it. I'm answering.
Can you speak to your motion?
So, in conclusion, Mr. Mayor, we know which way this is going to go. They're going to invest in a record of failure rather than investing in success and investing in the children of this borough. But let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's put our name to what we're actually voting on. I'm happy to move the motion, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy for residents to see who voted for what, not just on the cameras, but I move a recorded vote. Let's shame those who refuse to invest in success, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, for me too.
I'm happy to have a recorded vote, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. A recorded vote will be taken on the motion. Is everybody clear on what they're voting on? Yes? Okay, thank you. Slowly. Okay. It's been moved by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor Golby. This council believes that the implementation of the climbing wall has been a disaster for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth and has not provided both the level of service or value for money that the service it replaced, the play rangers, provided. This council therefore resolves to remove the climbing tower from the budget immediately and invest the savings made into reinstating the play rangers service.
Mr. Mayor, I will read out the name of each member who will then indicate if they are for or against the motion. Councillor Aldington. Against. Councillor Beaumont apologies. Councillor Bennett. Against. Councillor Bonner. For. Councillor Brindley. For. Councillor Copland. Against. Councillor Daffin. Against. Councillor Doughty. Not here. Councillor Elliott apologies. Councillor Gazane. For. Councillor Glass. Against. Councillor Golby. For. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. For. Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Haynes.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
Against.
Councillor Kondarka.
For.
Councillor Tony Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Ian Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Longdon.
Against.
Councillor Margrave.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Neil Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Pomfret.
Against.
Gwyn Pomfret, sorry. Councillor Margaret Pomfret.
Against.
Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Smith apologies. Councillor Tandy.
Against.
Councillor Tromans.
For.
Councillor Watkins.
Against.
And Councillor Wilson.
For.
The motion's lost. Okay, that takes us on to question 6. Councillor Gutteridge.
Now the new Borough depot at Gresham Road has been officially opened by the Mayor this week. Could you please tell me if the depot has all the relevant licences required for it to be fully operational? If not, when will the depot be fully operational? Thank you.
Thank you.
The Borough Council's frontline services that previously operated from St Mary's Road Depot, most notably refuse collection, street cleansing and housing maintenance, are now operating from Gresham Road and have been doing so for a number of months. St Mary's Road Depot is only being used as a waste transfer site. We are currently still waiting to hear from the Environment Agency in terms of our application for Gresham Road Depot to operate as a waste transfer site. We are confident that our application and the way in which we have set out our approach to operating a waste transfer site at Gresham Road will mean that we will very shortly receive approval from the Environment Agency. Mr Mayor, service continuity has not been affected by the move. This is down to the thought and planning that went into it and to the willingness of many of our employees to often go the extra mile and more. Most residents are unaware that this move has even taken place, despite efforts by some to imply that there is some sort of crisis. The same people who conveniently forget to mention that tens of thousands of pounds and more will be saved, in fact are being saved, and be available to maintain and improve services for many years to come. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Question, please. Your brainchild, Councillor Tandy, I'm just using it. I would like to move, Mr Mayor. This council expresses its dismay that, contrary to promises made by the controlling group, that the new Gresham Road would be fully operational by autumn, a deadline that has now been and gone, and the vast overspend that taxpayers have paid for, we are still without a fully functional depot. The council therefore calls upon the leader to replace the portfolio holder with immediate effect. And, Mr Mayor, I have nothing personal against Councillor Gwyn Pomfret, but he stood there 6 months ago. He said, and it's on video, if you're looking for someone to be held accountable, here I am. Well, this is about holding people to account, Mr Mayor. We were told at the start of the year we would be vacated completely from St Mary's by June. We will be handing over St Mary's to the developers or whoever's going to buy it by June. Come December, we're still in there. However you want to tidy it up and package it up and say only the waste transfer site is there, if we don't get the licence, which you should have applied for earlier, then the whole exercise of moving to Gresham Road has been defeated. If we don't get a licence, we've got another Labour white elephant. Now, you say that we've moved and we're making savings. At the moment, we're now operating two sites. We're operating St Mary's and we're operating Gresham Road. So we are still paying out to maintain those buildings. And they have an operational cost. And they ask us to trust them on how to operate and manage large-scale developments. And I mentioned this at Cabinet the other night. And for the life of me, I still don't understand why, when we're not moved in there by December, it is only showing as amber on the risk register. It should be glaringly red, because it is over budget and over timescale. We should learn lessons, and we should hold people accountable for what they have said in this chamber. We should hold people accountable for what they have promised to not only councillors but to residents, and they have failed to do so. Gresham Road at the moment is looking like a millstone around our neck until the controlling group can get its act in gear and deliver what they said they would, which they said we would have 6 months ago. 6 months have been and gone, and it's all well and good to have a nice shiny photo, and I'm sure you enjoyed yourself, Mr Mayor, going to open it, but if it's not fully functional and it's not open to the waste transfer site, then it has not fulfilled its purpose. You have spent another £1.6 million, I believe at last count, extra over the original capital budget. You keep saying that we will save this money in the revenue budget, the operational cost. Yes, but we have to find more money in the capital budget and then service the debt through the revenue budget extra borrowing that we're having to do. So by any operational standard, we have failed to keep to budget, we have failed to keep to time, we have failed to deliver a relatively, comparing to other authorities and other private companies, a relatively minor project. And that is damning of this council. And how can anyone, if you come to us in the future saying, we want to build this, we want to borrow that and deliver things for the town, all well and good, but how can we trust you to do things on time, on budget and to a decent standard? At the moment we can't, Mr Mayor, and that's the problem.
The motion seconded, useful because it was rather...
I'll second the motion and reserve my right to speak, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Condicore.
We have over the depot. I'm banned from asking officers questions now under the new protocol directly, but I can ask a few questions here about the depot. Very pertinent. Are we paying business rates still on the old site? Okay. What is the business rates on the old site? How much are we wasting on the second waste permit? Waste permits are like planning applications. They can take 3 months, they can take 9 months. The waste permit hasn't yet been advertised. Very much like a planning application, on the Environment Agency website, there's a list of waste permit applications. They have to be consulted on for 20 working days. That hasn't appeared. There is absolutely no sign of this going forward quickly, and we are losing, I assume, funding we'd get from selling the site. We have made a massive mess here. We should have had a risk process, we should have had a risk register, and a proper plan for moving, so we actually knew if we were on plan or not. When you ask questions, you were too busy and did it too quickly. You didn't do a business plan, it seems, and you didn't have a risk register. No wonder the project went wrong. It would be really useful to know what the current business plan is, what the current risk register is, because the risk of not getting a waste permit is quite a big one, and what your mitigation is if it doesn't get a permit.
Any other member? Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I was told tonight we would be operational very shortly with our waste licence. Very shortly. Where do we start? 1.4 million, or is it 1.6 million overspend? But it's going to save 100,000 a year. Well, in my maths, that's 16 years before we start saving. It is costing that amount of money. I was also told that the portfolio holder would have monthly meetings to speed the operation up. Nothing's happened. It is appalling. The residents of the borough are paying and paying and paying for a white elephant. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
I will not be asking Councillor Pomfret to leave his job in the Cabinet, because Councillor Pomfret, along with the rest of the Cabinet, is a very hard-working council member who takes his job very seriously and has been closely involved with this project from the beginning. We are proud of the new depot, Mr Mayor. We are proud of the fact that people in Abbey Green no longer have to suffer all these lorries going backwards and forwards day after day, and we are proud of the proper facilities that we now have for our hard-working employees who have not been on strike, to my knowledge, in the last 30 years, and perhaps that's because we treat them properly in this borough. Mr Mayor, to call for somebody's resignation, yet more abuse that we've had this evening, what sort of politics is that? I believe that the amendment that was made to the Constitution to allow a debate after a question was meant to be for the occasional matter that was raised that was of an urgent nature, not to keep going over and over old ground. Because as far as I can see, Mr Mayor, ask 10 questions, that's 10 times 15 minutes just on the questions. If you use that question time like that, Mr Mayor, then that is irresponsible. We are proud of the depot. The reasons have been clearly given by the officers. And yes, Councillor, The officers of this council are financially literate, and it is said so in every report of the district auditor or the auditors for the council. So let's look at independent judgment on this council and not on people who sit, jump up and down, waving their arms about like at the circus.
Order, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had to correct this on a number of occasions previously. The district auditors are not passing judgment on the council. They are passing judgment on the accounts, not the decisions behind them. Councillor Harvey's been leaving long enough and
Councillor Tromans, it's not up of information, but it's not at this time. Councillor Golby.
I'm going to do what Jeremy does. These are questions direct from the residents about the Gresham Road. How have they managed to go so much over budget? Surely you can find out how much the land is going to cost, work out how much you will have to spend to turn it into a glorified car park, maybe with a small building on it, and hey presto, there you have the cost with a few quid. Who is accountable? This is another resident. Who is accountable? Who actually gets into trouble or loses their job over this? Are there actually any consequences for the council so ruthlessly spending taxpayers' money? Ultimately, it's the residents that suffer as cuts that have to be made elsewhere, I would imagine. I've already said previously that if this had happened where I work, whoever was responsible to this would have been sacked a long time ago, because how you can go so wrong on costs for such a building is beyond me. It's a depot, okay, a depot. It was actually my first place that I visited when I was elected. It's in my patch. It was a shell that required a fit out and a car park that cost, the estimated cost was around 600,000, I believe. We then, we're pushing nearly 2 million quid now. Actually, it's over 2 million now, isn't it? There's also the agreement that we've got in place with Travis Perkins to park council vehicles on because we can't fit them on the depot. So we're using land at the back of Travis Perkins to park council vehicles as well. Now, I know when we've discussed the depot before, it was brought up that residents of the St Mary's Road area wouldn't have to suffer the vehicles going in and out all the time, but the depot's on my patch, and so's Travis Perkins. So are you going to tell my residents that they've just got to put up with it now because you've deemed that it's all right for St Mary's Road residents not to have to put up with vehicles, but you're quite happy for my residents to do that? That's another question that I was asked, actually, about the to-ing and fro-ing in vehicles coming onto Travis Perkins from the depot. So just passing on the residents' views.
When we talk about the residents of St Mary's Road no longer having to put up with the problems that they've had over the years with St Mary's Road depot, and then we hear Councillor Golby talking about her residents and the comments that they have made, might I just make the point, Chairman, that the depot will serve a lot more people and will do it much more satisfactorily when the Bermuda Bridge opens in the near future.
Thank you. 2 minutes.
Councillor Harvey hides behind the veil of abuse. It isn't abuse to hold someone to account for what they have done. He is in office, he holds power, therefore it is perfectly in order for elected members to hold office members to account. And if Councillor Harvey wishes to confuse that with abuse, be my guest, but that is what an opposition does. We hold you, who hold power, to account. Like it or lump it, if you can't stand it, switch sides, we'll be happy to do it any day of the week. Now, he
sides ever.
Talks about the use of motions. Well, we actually very rarely, because some things are so scripted in this place sometimes, Mr Mayor, actually get to discuss things. And he talks about being able to debate and discuss things. It has been 4 years in this chamber since we have had a single supplementary, yet we have finished within 2 hours and have a timescale of 3 hours, which we can decide to extend if we wish. If you don't want these things, actually allow debate and proper discussion. I'm happy to stay here till 10, 11 o'clock at night and discuss things on behalf of my residents. It's a question of whether you lot over there have the stamina to put up and actually defend your actions. Now, at the end of the day, By any measurable standard, what we have done at Gresham Road has not been a shining example of how a council should be run. It has not run to cost, it has not run to time, and it has not delivered what it set out to do at the start. It has not, as the saying goes, done what it says on the tin. Now, if that means that the portfolio holder has to, and he volunteered to do this when he came to council, says, I'm accountable, here I am, I'm ready to take questions and be held to account and stand up and do what is required of me because it's my job. President Truman used to have a little saying on his desk. It said, the buck stops here. But unfortunately, every time you ask a question in this chamber, it's blamed on everyone else. Perhaps Councillor Harvey, as a retirement present, would like a little saying on his desk which says, the buck stops elsewhere because I can't be bothered. Let's hold people to account and get the job done. I call for a recording vote, Mr. Mayor.
Got the motion. Got the motion. Just so people are clear, I've got the scripted motion in front of me. It's been moved and seconded. This council expresses its dismay that, contrary to promises made by the controlling group, that the new Gresham Road depot would be fully operational by autumn, a deadline that has now been and gone, and the vast overspend that taxpayers have paid for, we are still without a fully functional depot. This council therefore calls upon the leader to replace the portfolio holder with immediate effect.
Mr. Mayor, I will read out the name of each member who will then indicate if they are for or against the motion you've just read out. Councillor Aldington.
Against.
Councillor Bennett.
Against.
Councillor Bonner.
I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Brindley. Councillor Copland.
Against.
Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty, not here. Councillor Elliott, apologies. Councillor Gizane.
For.
Councillor Glass.
Against.
Councillor Golby.
For.
Councillor Gran.
For.
Councillor Gutteridge.
For.
Councillor Hancocks.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Haynes.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
Against.
Councillor Kondaka.
For.
Councillor Tony Lloyd. Oh, sorry.
He's here. He said against.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Ian Lloyd. Councillor Councillor Longden. Councillor Margrave. Councillor Caroline Phillips. Councillor Neil Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Gwyn Pomfret. Councillor Margaret Pomfret. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Watkins. Councillor Wilson.
The motion's lost. Can I ask if you want to have a chit-chat, go outside the room so we can carry on with the meeting, please? Question number 7, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is the shortened version because my first line was not allowed. Your budget, this is for the leader obviously, your budget proposals include plans to externalise the operation of the climbing wall and stop £32,470 support for the Warwickshire advice rights. What service, in terms of cost and hours of operation, do we expect to get from the climbing tower if it's operated externally, and from Warwickshire advice rights if it is carried on with if we carry on with their funding in the next year? Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Mr. Mayor, as a result of placing the climbing tower out for procurement and a successful partner then being awarded, we are requesting 25 sessions to be delivered within Nuneaton and Bedworth between April and the end of November each year for the next 2 years, 2018-19 and 19-20. These delivery sessions will include town centres, the main parks, summer holiday provision, and at local events such as carnivals and the Christmas lights switch-ons in Nuneaton, Bedworth and Bulkington. Over 200 hours of climbing tower delivery will be undertaken by the successful organisation over the 2-year partnership. For this delivery, the cost will be circa 40,000 2018 and March 2020. When the potential organisation is not delivering the agreed MBBC programme, it is hoped that the successful organisation will utilise the tower at many more local events, school and community activities in Nuneaton and Bedworth. As regards Warwickshire employment and advice rights, all such matters will be discussed during the consultation period in the months to come. I would remind Councillor Kondoka that the Council is struggling to balance the budget in 2018, and we are still well short of the sums needed to avoid a deficit.
Thank you.
To ask the Leader of the Council. The Council has recently taken a decision to allow Poundland to remain in their council-owned store at a peppercorn rate of £1 a year, which is now costing the taxpayer £250,000 in subsidy, being funded by council reserves, and is therefore unsustainable moving forward. This decision sets a very worrying precedent. Should other tenants in council-owned premises face a similar difficulty, is it now this council's policy to subsidise rents indefinitely? Or is the case that the decision is at the whim of the Leader and other shops in our town centres will be left to go under, depending on who is in favour with the council leadership at the time? Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
The actual agreement that's been made, Mr Mayor, and I'm sure Simone Hines will be only too happy to give him the details again. But firstly, I'm surprised at Councillor Wilson. Firstly, you should know that such financial decisions cannot be taken on the whims of the Leader, as he says, but are taken on sound financial advice from our property and finance teams, all of whom are highly qualified, and each case is considered on its merits. Secondly, I'm surprised he should know, in his position, or should not know, that the council would have been in much greater loss should the property remain unoccupied, as the council will be liable for business rates, insurance and void costs such as security, electricity, water, etc., because there are standing charges. The decision to allow Poundland to occupy the property on a temporary basis while a long-term occupier can be secured is in the best interests of the council, the town centre and the residents of the borough. We still get the business rates from these premises. Perhaps Councillor Wilson would prefer that we forego these and leave the premises empty, right in the heart of the town. What effect would that have on surrounding businesses? We are, Mr Mayor, currently seeking a new tenant, and the agreement is such that if and when negotiations are complete, Poundland will leave.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the questions by members. Takes us on to item 9, special urgency decisions. There's been no decisions taken under that rule. So that takes us on to item number 10. The Cabinet and the report is attached within the agenda but from the Leader of the Council. Any member? Does he need to introduce it? Or? No.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. We're on page, well, the start of it is on the actual item is on page 45. I would like to say, Mr Mayor, of course, that included in this, at the request of the opposition, is a report from the West Midlands Combined Authority meeting, and, you know, it's very interesting that we forged ahead with membership of the West Midlands Combined Authority against abuse not only from people opposite, but, you know, people all, other authorities, they weren't all going to join, they've all joined now, of course. And look at the advantages already that this has brought to this area, Mr Mayor. We are getting employment support pilot money that is many, many times the amount of money that we pay in. We are now involved in the situation regarding the new West Midlands Rail franchise, and there are many more benefits to come. So I say, Mr Mayor, this is the proof that we were right all along in terms of the West Midlands Combined Authority, and of course we have been praised by the Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands and the Deputy Mayor, who is the leader of Solihull, Councillor Bob Slay. So it's interesting that locally our Conservative opposition didn't have that foresight but there are various matters regarding the finance, Mr Mayor. I know these were, almost every single item was commented upon by certain councillors opposite the back of the council for further question here, and I'm sure there will be some.
Councillor Condicore.
Start with the one on page 45, the interim monitoring report. This is obviously for the planning and development portfolio holder. In here it mentioned in the report we had an interim monitoring report. Every year the borough plan or the local plan is supposed to deliver some housing, some jobs, etc. And the monitoring report, which is supposed to be a full monitoring report, should have happened by now, and we should have had one last year. This monitoring report tells us how much affordable housing is being done and how much industrial space. When will we get the proper monitoring reports? Because these interim reports don't include the affordable housing and the employment land. Thank you.
Not responsible for the annual monitoring report. I do believe it comes around this time of year. The interim monitoring report was something completely different.
Any other member? Councillor Wilson.
Confused with accountability, but then again, if you don't like it, I suppose that's another matter. Going on again about the interim monitoring report, it says in the interim monitoring report that went to Cabinet that we are actually over-delivering on the number of units being developed year on year within the authority, which helps meet the overspill which the Labour Party have agreed to from Coventry with no consultation with anyone. But there is already, in the underlying foundations of the borough plan, a 10% over-delivery built in as a buffer. So with the buffer already built in and the over-delivery, are we not double accounting? And would the portfolio holder look, bearing in mind the new evidence, at reducing the number of houses they are now looking at imposing on the residents of this borough?
The Mayor, very simple, no.
Councillor Golby.
To bring up something that's on page 48, which is the employment support pilot that comes under the West Midlands Combined Authority, I believe. I see in there that we've got Camp Hill under the employment support that has led, it says the modelling has led to the identification of 9 target areas. The area in Nuneaton is Camp Hill for the pilot, which will contain place-based saturation approach, focusing on those who are out of work, but also working and those that are on low incomes. We have in this borough several areas known as SOAs, which are basically areas of deprivation, and I just wondered when they're actually going to get a look in with any additional funding. I was under the impression, as of the last communities Pride in Camp Hill report from last year, that Camp Hill already has an active programme to try and get people in employment, and I was just concerned that other areas are also missing out on this type of thing, and we're duplicating in Camp Hill.
Councillor Harvey.
Where we've decided where the money will be spent, this is where the West Midlands have decided, quite independently of us in that sense, where they believe that the money should be spent. And yes, we would want that sort of assistance all across the borough, because if it was, it would amount to many millions, and we would obviously push for that. But bearing in mind that we've done very well so far, I think it would be very irresponsible of us to refuse the money.
Franchise. Clearly that is work done by the West Midlands councils, the county council and the Department for Transport, so I'm surprised we're trying to take credit for it. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, do you understand, Councillor Harvey, that these new services we're getting will not come this year? Some of them will come not till next year, and the Bay platform at Coventry is potentially 4 years away. So we are not getting a Nuneaton, Coventry to Leamington train service. Do you understand what we're getting, Councillor Harvey? Did you actually go to the meeting?
Councillor Harvey.
Probably the best attendance record at the West Midlands CA of any local authority. I stand to be challenged by perhaps one of them. But of course I understand, Mr Mayor, I was at the meeting.
To page 46, item 5AI or 1. I, like many councillors in this chamber, have had to deal with unauthorised encampments that caused real distress to parts of our community. And I note here that a working group has been set up by the Police and Crime Commissioner. And it was positive to note that our work was held up as an exemplar. Would the leader join me in congratulating our staff and celebrating this success in what is a difficult circumstance? And is he aware whether the Police and Crime Commissioner or the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, like us, will be asking the Members of Parliament in Warwickshire, namely Marcus Jones, to make amendments to the law so we can do a better job in dealing with unauthorised encampments?
Councillor Harvey?
More consistently, Mr Mayor, so I can't tell you the last time exactly, but the Warwickshire Police and Crime Commissioner actually did have a meeting here of all Warwickshire authorities, and Coventry was here as well, and in fact the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner sent a representative, and in fact the information that was used for that was directly from this authority, with Philip Richardson advising the meeting, and we were very pleased that a lot of the myths that were being thrown about were dispersed with at that meeting because of what they'd heard from Nuneaton and Bedworth. So it is a problem that we are still continuing to press the MPs for, but we did have a meeting here, Mr Mayor, and yet again I was at the meeting.
Moments.
4, extending the PSP or granting the PSPO, very welcome. Done just in the nick of the time before the previous regulations ran out. But we have been pressing for public space protection orders to be extended beyond this remit into a whole bunch of other issues like gypsy and traveller, unauthorised vehicular access, lifted dog, all the rest of it. So we would hope that public space protection orders will be further utilised now that this one has been implemented by the council, that they will go further. And then I would like to say on point 5, in respect of the Gypsy and Traveller protocol that was drawn up and produced by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, Warwickshire Police and Crime Commissioner Philip Seckham, there was agreement from all of the councils to back that protocol. It's very welcome that Nuneaton and Bedworth have signed it. But that protocol does call for people to meet their responsibilities fully. And a big part of that is for us to continue the target hardening that we've already undertaken in some parts of the borough. That does need to be extended to all the parts that are at risk. And
Councillor
the work
Tromans,
needs to be finished.
Can you ask your question? It's meant to be questions.
Yeah, so can I ask the question, that will we have an assurance that that target hardening will be finished, because there is clearly some areas that still haven't been protected fully. Thank you.
So, Harvey? Pomfret?
Well, there were things in Councillor Pomfret.
Of the programme for hardening of sites and what sites have not been hardened, and I'm not sure what the financial situation is as to whether we can afford to carry on. I'll make inquiries along those lines. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Councillor Wilson's very good question earlier. With regards to this 10% flexibility for non-delivery, myself and other councillors received a letter from the government inspector saying that this was an unnecessary policy. So can this now be amended and removed from the policy?
If he wants to send me a copy of the letter, I'm quite happy to have a look at it.
Okay, that takes us then on to item number 11. We've got a number of recommendations from the Cabinet or other committees. The first one is from the Audit and Standards Committee and the Anti-Money Laundering Framework. Councillor Tandy?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the Constitution in relation to the Anti-Money Laundering Framework be updated accordingly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Any member? No? In that case, all those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And B, amendments to Audit and Standards Committee terms of reference to allow for approval of annual accounts. Councillor Tandy?
I move that the constitution regarding the terms of reference to allow for approval of the annual accounts be that the constitution be updated accordingly.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Councillor Condico.
Time, there seems to be some confusion between auditing, definitely what we spend has been properly recorded, and actually auditors giving an opinion on whether the council is well run and well managed. I think the two things are quite separate, and in the audit process, our external auditors actually will do value for money reports and respond to electors who've got concerns about how badly this council is run. So I want to make clear what is happening in this audit committee approving the accounts is only approving the financial numbers being correct. It is not approving a report that says the council is well run.
All those in favour? And against? And abstentions? That's clearly carried. Item number C. Again, audit and standards, appointment of independent persons. Councillor Tandy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the constitution, that the appointment of the independent persons, as stated in the report, is accepted, Mr. Mayor.
Is that seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Condico.
People involved, they should play an important part, and my next kangaroo court is expected on the 8th of January.
Councillor Condico, sit down. I can't be listening to it. No. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous, thank you. Item D is Cabinet recommendation on the General Fund and HRA draft budgets for 2018/19. Is it Councillor Harvey?
Mr. Mayor, with respect to the General Fund and budget monitoring, I move that the revised General Fund capital programme for 2017-18 be approved.
Is that?
Just got to be aware that it's only General Fund Capital Programme that they can speak to, 88 and 89.
Yeah. I'm just being reminded that the only part of this that we're talking to is the capital funding, which is page 88. Councillor Brindley. I'm advised that it's only page, what did we say?
88 and 89.
88 and 89. Councillor Condico.
Which page numbers are we allowed to talk on? This is getting ridiculous.
88 and 89.
Because we should...
Councillor Condico, pages 88 and 89.
I'll get there in a moment. 88 and 89. These budget items are really important. And the council is the thing that should agree the budgets. It is the final arbiter of what we spend money on, and it seems perverse that we can only spend our time talking about certain pages.
Councillor Condico, can you sit down, please?
Yeah.
I would like to talk about
things when it's the appropriate item. You're talking about budgets, we're talking about page 88 and page 89. Sorry, just 88. I did see other hands going up. Councillor Golby.
Okay.
Well,
it is. Can you please direct us to exactly where in the Constitution, not you personally, but officers, that says, even though this is an item, an agenda item, it's before the council, that we cannot talk about the draft General Fund and HRA budget as titled? Why are we only restricted to one page, the capital bit? If we could just have direction, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I'm receiving advice.
Only, at the 22nd, only the capital programme on page 88 has come to council. That is all that is being discussed. That was all that was agreed in the minutes to come to this council.
From Cabinet?
From Cabinet.
To come here tonight?
Yes, just this.
That was the only one that was agreed?
Yes.
Right, I'm told that the only item at Cabinet on the 22nd that was formally agreed and to come here to be determined tonight is that capital programme on page 88. Well, I think we've covered the point of order. It's just been asked.
You haven't heard the point of order yet, so how do you know?
I don't quite find it that hilarious, actually. Please say to your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what you're saying, but it was my understanding at Cabinet that they actually agreed not just the capital budget, but also at Cabinet they agreed the revenue savings. They were both one and the same. They were part of the same report. So what is the point in wasting taxpayers' money in reprinting something we can't discuss?
I would suggest you ask Phil just to...
Okay. I don't like doing this. It's not normally the case for myself, but I've got to say I'm a bit taken aback by it. So I am going to ask Mr. Richardson if he can attempt to explain it to us so that we're all clearer on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The position is that Cabinet considered a report in connection with the draft capital programme for the current year, plus some budget proposals for future years. Cabinet obviously made its decisions on the draft budget, but in order to progress with the capital programme report, or the items that were being updated in the capital programme, they have to come here for approval. So the only thing that was actually referred to full council is in fact the capital programme items. I take the point that Councillor Wilson's made. We have put the full report in there, but it is purely really for information. It is not actually before council for consideration. The only element that is for consideration is page 88. And if I can just take members to the agenda itself, because I think it's fairly explicitly set out in the agenda on page 5. If you look at 5D, you'll see that it says resolved that the revised General Fund Capital Programme for 2017-18 be recommended for council for approval. That's the actual bit that is actually before council as an agenda item. So, as is normal, council is debarred from considering items that are not before it. So it has to deal with that which is before it. In this case, the capital programme item. I don't know whether I need to say any more, Mr. Mayor, but that's the position. That's why it states it there specifically, and it is the way that we would normally present it to council for members.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the wording there, I mean, it's the heading which leads people into a different direction, whereas it's actually the General Fund Capital Programme be recommended for council. So we're back where we are. I apologise if I've missed anybody. It's been a bit of a... Councillor Bonner.
88, under Arts and Leisures. Okay, if you insist. On page 88, under Arts and Leisures, I apologise to the portfolio holder that I haven't brought this up before, but I've only just noticed the cost of turning some tennis courts into netball courts at the Pingle site has gone up from 40,000 to 50,000. Now, I know some people might think that £10,000 in our overall budget, or even £50,000 in our overall budget, isn't a lot of money. But again, it seems to highlight to me that whoever did the assessment, the survey of these turning these tennis courts into netball courts, got it wrong by 20%, 25% perhaps, depending on how you do your sums. I don't understand that. Can anybody explain for me, please?
Any other member? Councillor Condacourt.
On here, It is burning about £1 million a year, and it's still on here about 400,000 to be spent. The project seems to be going ahead in some ways, but is actually totally undeliverable, and there's lots of good work done on other stuff to actually get an alternative, including the College Street project, which will put traffic lights at the junction of Greenmore Road and Heath End Road that will help the traffic out there. Obviously, if the borough plan happens we build on Arbury Lawns, there might be a route across there. And so if in January the Bermuda Bridge project does get cancelled, what happens to this money in your capital project? Because if a project doesn't go ahead, capital has to become revenue because you don't have the thing you were paying for.
Times in the past is my understanding, and I'll ask officers if I'm wrong, is that it's not our money, we're holding it on behalf of somebody else. So perhaps at some time that'll trickle down. Okay then, it's been moved and seconded, the General Fund and HRA draft budgets for 2018, and the revised General Fund Capital Programme. All those in favour of that?
Could I just ask the question? He asked a question.
What? And against? That's carried. We were, if I can just say, it was an item for debate. Members spoke, and I looked around the room, there was nobody else to speak, so I took the vote. Item E, the Treasury Management 17-18. Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. With respect to the Treasury Management mid-year review, I move that the report be noted and the changes to the prudential indicators as detailed within the report and summarised at Appendix A be approved. And it is just that I'm moving, not anything else that's out of complete conjecture.
Thank you. Councillor Condicorn.
The officers doing our treasury management, they have a really difficult job to do, particularly with the change of economic circumstances, the stupid vote to leave the EU, the collapse of the pound, changes of interest rates. They have a really hard job to do. But one thing they're doing is they're creating funds to service our capital requirements. And one of the projects we're doing is we're buying properties up as well, out of the capital budget to produce revenue income. This is potentially a good idea, but it does need to be done very carefully. And we have made so many mistakes in the past. We've put money in Icelandic banks. We bought the old Woolworths to rent out for £1 a year, even though we spent £4 million on it. We've done so many foolish things. So I ask, for these projects in the capital programme now, do we have a proper risk assessment so that when we actually spend some money in the capital programme on buying property...
I think you're on the wrong page here, Councillor Condicorn.
What pages are we allowed to talk
We're speaking about the Treasury Management.
Yes, and so and on the Treasury Management, on page 97, it's got all the things we're spending money on. And I'm just checking whether we're spending money on things we have a risk assessment for. I'll give up at this point. I think I'll go to the pub.
Yeah, we'll all have our own views on things, but it's probably best if we keep them to ourselves for the moment. Councillor Wilson.
Management report is just what it says on the tin. It is basically an account of how we spend money, not where it is spent. We have our differences over where it is spent. That's politics, we get used to it. But this is basically an account of where it is spent and where the capital and the borrowing comes from. As I said at the Cabinet, and unlike Councillor Condicorn, with reference to the Nabsel homes, and my declaration is there on file, actually, it is one of the more innovative schemes that this council has come up with over the years, and it is on a cross-party basis where I'm sure that Councillor Harvey will actually agree with me for once on this, that I think myself, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Jackson work quite well on the board of Nabsel, delivering in the interests of the residents. And we always put that first, and party politics is left at the door. But one of the things that I mentioned, and I think it's worth putting on the record here at full council, is that a number of the areas of borrowing, it reports in here, we have about £42 million worth of, capital deposits. We have about £42 million worth of capital deposits. With the current climate we're in, it's good for mortgages, but it isn't so good for those who want to see a rate of return on their investment. And we are currently getting, on average, between about 0.3 and 0.5% return on our deposits. And I would like to see the council look more proactively at seeing whether we can use these deposits more proactively through the NABCEL programme, so that, because we're averaging about 5 to 7% yield on the properties that we are getting through NABCEL. It isn't something like Iceland, which took us out of the blue, and the government, up until the day before the crash in Iceland, was still rating it as AAA. You are investing in bricks and mortar. It is a fixed capital asset. It is always going to be there. It's not fluid. It's not subject to the same whims of the market as other areas. You might get a bit of depreciation, but on the whole, if you invest in bricks and mortar, you tend to get a good return. So I would hope that, and I know that Councillor Harvey's given this undertaking to investigate, but I hope that the council will look more proactively at using some of our capital deposits to actually invest further in NABCEL, so we start to see some greater returns coming through into the revenue budget, which is supporting our revenue budget to a tremendous extent, actually, the amount of money coming back through NABCEL, and is forecast to do so. So, unlike others in this chamber, I am not sceptical about NABCEL, and just because I happen to sit on the board, I know some people think because I don't sit on the board it must be bad and everything going on with it is not to the interest of residents. But I can say, and I'm happy to say in front of anyone and in front of the cameras, NABCEL is working for the residents of this borough. The councillors on it are working for the residents of this borough, but there is more we can do, and perhaps looking at where we invest that capital money, we could see a bit better return for our money in the long run. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. It's very rare that I do agree with Conservatives, of course, although Anna Silbury seems to be saying quite a lot of sensible things. She's on the telly recently. But I'm tempted to vote for her if I lived in her constituency. However, Mr. Mayor, I've got to say that, the board of NABCEL, as Councillor Wilson says, doesn't work on a party political basis. It works on the basis of what sound economic sense for this council, and investing in bricks and mortar is clearly sound economic sense. It doesn't pose the sort of risks that Councillor Kondako is saying, because wherever the money is invested in financial markets, there is where the risk is, wherever it might well be. But with the bricks and mortar, we've still got the building at the end of the day. And in fact, we've got an increasing number of buildings. The thing about these buildings are, some of them are just houses we bought and we let out commercially. Others, like the new hostels that we've built, are helping people who are homeless, whilst at the same time, so they're helping with the people on their homeless list, or the people who have become homeless, and they're helping with the council's finances. NABCEL is in fact an organisation that is looked at by other councils, Mr. Mayor, and one of the advantages of the meeting, when you go to the meeting, and I hope nobody starts doing this, one advantage is nobody sits there jumping up and down and waving their arms about.
The mid-year review the mid-year review has been moved and seconded. All those in favour of that? And against? And abstentions? Thank you, that's carried. Takes us on to item number F, Local Council Tax Support 1819.
The proposed local council tax support scheme for the 1st of April 2018 onwards be approved, and the Director of Finance and Procurement be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the scheme in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance and city affairs.
Councillor Kondako.
So I wanted to say about this, the local council tax support scheme is paid for out of the collection fund. So the money we're giving to help people in difficulty is out of the pot before it's actually divided up. And therefore, If we underspend on our hardship fund, we've got a £60,000 hardship fund. If we spend £20,000 on that hardship fund, that £40,000 goes to the county council, about 2/3 of it, to the fire service, about 12-13%, and to the borough council, about 12 and 13%. So we are actually not helping our residents by not having that hardship fund as easy to use as possible. And also, if we reduce the minimum council tax payment from 20% to 19%, that reduction also is paid for by the pool. So effectively, the way we're running this system, if we get the system perfectly right, it is neutral. But if we get it wrong, the surpluses go into the collection pool. And we have an issue here that we are actually cross-funding people in Stratford-upon-Avon.
Thank you. The Council's eye to page 113, 4.3 and 4.4. Councillor Condacourt talked just a minute ago about not using the hardship fund. I mean, if we look at 2017-18, there's about 75-80% used there. However, I've got to say, Mr Mayor, what a shocking indictment of 2017 Britain that is, that people are actually having to apply for a hardship fund and that they haven't got the means to pay for their own council tax. 4.4, again, what a shocking indictment. The fact that this universal credit that is in crisis from the that has been implemented by the government. Already we know that 40,000 children will not be have the money to spend at Christmas, which I think is absolutely appalling, Mr Mayor. I do not want to see a report like this personally, but unfortunately in today's society we have to have it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Well, most of them issue, Mr Mayor, and I know that the council officers are very aware of the needs of local people and they're willing to help them. And as Councillor Aldington said, the situation is deplorable that we should be having to do that.
Local council tax support 18 and 19 is to be resolved. All those in favour of that? And against? Don't think I've missed anybody. Abstentions? No. That's carried. Which takes us on to item G, private sector housing shared service. Councillor Jackson.
The recommendations on page 6 at item G, the council enter into a shared services arrangement with North Warwickshire Borough Council to discharge North Warwickshire Borough Council functions relating to the Housing Act and other relevant functions in accordance with section 101 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the Local Government Act, brackets, arrangements for the discharge of functions, England, Regulations 2000. 2. Delegated authority be given to the Director Housing and Communities in consultation with the Portfolio for Housing and Communities to agree the terms for the provision of the functions on behalf of partner authorities. And 3. The vacant sector, private sector housing post is increased from 30 to 37 hours to help accommodate the additional work on a temporary basis using the reserve as indicated. Chair, this is sound financial management, and I so move the motion.
Second.
Any member? Councillor Tromans.
Happy to support this, I certainly am, provided it is one of those reports that turns out to be correct. Provided that this time, we do get the savings, we do get the generated income, that things are portrayed to us, because so many reports come to this council that paint a very rosy picture of how things will work out, the depot, whatever, and it never works out that way. I hope it does this time, and we're trusting that it will, and we'll support it.
No? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. The anger being expressed by Councillor Tromans. This is about sound financial management. It's not funny. This is actually the Borough Council's money that we hold on behalf of council taxpayers. This is a serious issue.
Personal explanation, Mr Mayor. Can you confine yourself to the motion and not talk about my emotions? Thank you.
This is showing financial management of the council in a positive manner. And it's also talking about resilience of a service. I think that's positive. I can hear you mumbling under your breath, Councillor Tromans. I don't speak when you're speaking, and I would ask for the same courtesy from yourself. This is sound financial management in the best interest of the residents of this borough, and it will provide, in addition to financial savings, resilience. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, the item's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous, thank you. I believe that concludes the business. Can I thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.